So can I just take us to the next phase? This has given a very clear indication that you, the members, want a distinct approach for different type of drugs, an approach for different type of drugs. Okay, that's fair enough. That's what F has demonstrated. Not one universal model for all, but a particular model for some and others. So we're going to move into a little bit of a complex piece now, because there's a lot of drugs that we'll ask Carl to display in a minute. There's a lot of types of drugs. I think in our deliberations, there's been, and this is where I am going to test the room rather than going through ballot after ballot after ballot. In our deliberations, there has been a reasonable level of discussion and debate around the issue of cannabis and what approach might be taken to that. You will have the option of those models for whatever drug type we're talking about now. But I will test the room in a moment or two just to see what approach you want to take. Is it just one drug, for example, cannabis, I'm not saying it, or is one drug cocaine or magic mushrooms, and then all others a different approach? Or again, do you want to go through various different ones? So we're going to test the room in a minute for it. First of all, can we just declare the result if it's no on the screen? Not yet. No, we will do that. We'll do that in a moment. So that's where we're at now. You'll need to work with me. We'll need to test the room what drugs we're going to ballot on for an approach. And it might be that we'll have some drugs for individual models, and then the rest will fall into a ballot separately. So just work with us till we test the room where you want to go in terms of the individual ballots on drugs. Do you want to list them, or is it worthwhile? We just go ahead, Carl.
We're just going to put up a list on screen. If our screen shifts, Ryan, would you mind putting up my monitor? So this is the list that we had originally devised. It may be incomplete, it may not be the way people want it listed, but as Paul said, the strongest signal we've had from members throughout the process is that some people in the room believe cannabis should be treated differently, others don't. But let's see whether you want a separate ballot paper on cannabis with a show of hands.
Yeah. Let's do it. So that's a list there. So just work with us for a couple of minutes, right? And again, a show of hands. Do you believe we should have a specific ballot on cannabis to determine the model applying for cannabis?
Yeah.
Okay. I think
that's sufficient.
That's sufficient. You're not looking for absolutes, so that's sufficient.
Yeah.
And again, just bear with me on this one, right? Would you be satisfied that we class everything else, the one model for all the rest of the drugs? Or do you think there's other drugs we should take as well? So, sorry, yeah. So do you feel we should look at other type of drugs first of all? Just put your hands up as well for a different approach. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, you have clarified we should look at cannabis and have a ballot around it. Okay. So it seems like you feel there are other type of drugs. Are there other type of drugs you feel you would like to determine what model is applied to it?
You can ask for a proposal from the room.
Yes. Okay. There are. Okay. Of course, Marie.
No. Yeah, it's not an illicit drug. So.
Okay. So you do feel we should take an approach for other types of drugs. Can I just suggestions from the room? What type of drugs do you think we should give specific attention to? Sorry, so we have mushrooms.
Is it worth having a conversation around natural, like plant-based drugs and synthetic or manufactured drugs? Is that how we would separate them? I don't know.
Sorry, can you just indicate your hands, please? Jack is over here as well. Or no, sorry, apologies.
I guess I would also, I would agree with what that member just said, but I'd also possibly add MDMA or ecstasy as an exceptional drug that I believe deserves maybe a separate ballot.
Any more? Sorry, any more else? We've certainly had MDA, ecstasy. Sorry, we certainly had MDMA, ecstasy, magic mushrooms, I think was indicated. Sorry, plant-based, synthetic. Sorry, go ahead.
I think this is where we probably need Johanna Ivers to come in with a bit of technical information. Sorry. So what I would suggest, right, is we have a show of hands for who would favour. So there's been several options proposed, right? One is for example, Jack's proposal around MDMA and ecstasy. Should that be treated as a separate ballot question? And a simple show of hands will give us a sense of whether or not the room believes that. And similarly with other drugs there, so plant-based drugs, but as one member pointed out, Kerry, cocaine is a plant-based drug, and heroin. So using a terminology that's too broad probably confuses the issue, right? So there has been a number of members throughout the course of the process arguing that drugs like psilocybin, ayahuasca, ibogaine, etc., have a therapeutic value, and there is probably an argument that some members would like to advance that should be included as a separate category. DMT in there as well, yeah, okay.
Barry, sorry, just get your mic, Barry, 1 second.
Just as a way of classing these, is there not already a class system for these drugs, as in class 1, class 2 and class 3?
Johanna, can you add something to this to help us, please?
Yes.
The trouble is that you're looking at it like classification system. We clearly have a classification system of what drugs fall under what classification from a drug perspective, but there's a bit of blurred conversation going on about the class system as in the legal system. They're two different things. I think that consideration really needs to be given to the members in terms of how they're going to divide drugs up and how they're going to consider the treatment of those. It's not something that should be taken lightly.
Yeah.
That's my talking to you.
Hi, sorry, I just kind of asked the room, maybe this is unpopular, but what do we want to achieve by if we make it really, really complex? Like if we divide it down so much, are we not just going to dilute our recommendations? We only want to recommend 10 things or 5 or 6 things so that our recommendations are actually uptaken. Is it not going to dilute what we're trying to do if we end up having a spectrum of recommendations across all different drugs?
And that's an option for the members. You can take an approach for 1 or 2 or 3 type drugs, and all the rest fall into, another category that we're not dealing with.
I mean, I would suggest, even though there's been suggestions for specific drugs or classes of drugs made here, it needs to have an endorsement from a significant number in the room for it to become a ballot question. So if there is a number of people speaking up in favour of including certain drugs, we need to gauge the temperature of the room and the willingness of the room to treat those separately, because there is an argument made that we can get too finite and too specific. And then there's another argument that we need to do that. So the members, are the best placed people to determine that. And so...
Yeah, no, I think Carl's right. It'd be very complex to go through every kind of drug and make a recommendation on every kind of drug. We are trying to specify, are there some that we do believe, and we will have to test a room rather than go for a ballot on it.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
Start with
so I'm going to start. Sorry, Johanna, was it coming back in again?
I suppose just to crystallise what I was trying to say is that they really need to decide whether they're basing their classification system on the harms of drugs or the legal classification. So whether or not it's legal or not, and just a change to that, or if you're looking at whether a drug is harmful or to a person or the people around them or to society, that's a whole other argument that needs consideration.
I'm going to test just where the room is willing to go and not willing to go. Okay, so we've had cannabis. I've just tested the room. I'll do it again. Hands up if you're in favour of getting cannabis to a ballot about what type of approach applies to that drug. Okay, simple. That's fine. That's clear. MDMA, ecstasy. Hands up if you want a particular vote on that.
It's not sufficient.
It's not a sufficient number in the room believe to treating that separately, differently. It's quite a minority. Okay? Magic mushrooms was listed. Okay. There's a reasonable number in the room believe that's one that should be tested. Okay? So far cannabis and magic mushrooms, the room believes there should be a vote on those, right? Is there any other one that I've left out? Any other type drug? Sorry? No? Sorry?
Okay, thanks. I think the classification you have there at the bottom, I think it encapsulates a number of substances that are very closely aligned in terms of their therapeutic value. So mushrooms, ayahuasca, I think it should all be the one vote.
Yeah, sorry, I'd agree with him. It seems like a lot of people are for cannabis and most hallucinogenics.
Where's that coming from? Right. Or William?
Sorry, I didn't know where.
Yeah, it seems like most people are for going for cannabis and most hallucinogenics, not just psilocybin, like DMT and
So
ayahuasca.
that bottom line, rather than just mushrooms, we go for the entire spectrum of, or the entire range of drugs on here. DMT,
Okay.
psilocybin.
Okay, so it's those listed together. Is that the question, Barry? Yeah. Okay, so cannabis plus those. That's so far what we've determined a ballot goes forward from. For you to determine what model approach. Okay?
Ecstasy's ruled out, and
Ecstasy and MDA is ruled
yeah, do
out.
you want to
Sorry,
go
Jackie, do you want
cocaine
one
or-
more question?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if this should receive its own independent ballot, but I do feel like synthetic opiates and other synthetic drugs should be kind of given their own specific categories because they are completely divorced from the others. Obviously, they're a much more modern phenomena, and I believe they should be treated as somewhat separate to the others. At least to the other, I guess, more conventional opiates and stimulants.
Can I test that? Test that in the room if the room.
And you might want to bring in Brian Galvin to speak on stimulants.
Yeah. Can I test that in the room as well, please? If there's a. You'll have to clarify. Because the room has indicated they want a specific model for some kinds of drugs. We're trying to determine.
On what basis are we then going to?
On the basis of the last vote, the room has
No, but
determined.
on the basis of what the law should be around.
Yeah, good point. On the basis of what model should apply from those models A down to E.
What
that we spoke
legislative
of.
approach, yeah.
What legislation approach should be applied? So, I have two. I know Jack's question there, which I'm sorry.
Synthetic opioids, is it?
Synthetic opioids. Is there a majority? Sorry, can I test the room? How do people believe we should put that on the ballot? In terms of, sorry. I know. I'm just trying to get this vote first. Yeah. Can you just test the room first on this one?
Fentanyl and other synthetic opioids.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, Brian, maybe somebody. Would you be able to?
Brian or Johanna?
Brian or Johanna, just to clarify, synthetic opioids.
Okay, yeah, and I've got it. Yeah.
Can you stand up, Brian? Please?
Hiya.
Just stand up, Brian, just so everybody can see it clearly. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think the point was well made that there are a huge number of new drugs that come into that list. I think 800 different drugs that the MCDA are looking at. And it's not just opioids, it's cannabinoids and cathinones. They are a very different category, and they're and some are legal at the moment, and some are not. It's a very complex area. How you integrate it into the current list, I'm not sure. It's a tricky one, but we do have to consider it. Try and think of 3 years' time, when there are going to be a lot more of these drugs available. And things like ketamine, I don't see it on that list either. It's, we didn't even, I think it didn't appear 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's quite common. The list is, it can't be comprehensive. It's, but I would classify all the new drugs, I think, together. Okay, don't take out synthetic opioids from the cannabinoid drugs or cathinones. That's my.
And Brian, would those be termed new psychoactive
new
substances?
psychoactive substances? Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And there are, I think, nearly 1,000 in circulation at the moment and growing all the time. So we do have to think about this.
Okay, again, and come back, Jack made a point. Do people believe, based on some clarification given by Brian, that they would like that tested on a ballot? Can you show your hands if you think you would like that tested on a ballot? Okay, that doesn't stand. Sorry, I just need to call in the mics. I need to call in the mics. There's a few people, so go ahead. Just indicate your hand and we'll call it in.
Yeah. So when we say cannabis, is that going to be irrespective of the strength of cannabis, the strain of cannabis, what the cannabis is mixed with? Because when we say cannabis, that's quite a large umbrella group, but that also has different strengths, different strains, different THC. And we heard, I believe, from a number of speakers about the impact, effects, and dangers of cannabis. So if we're going to get into this level of differentiating between good drugs and bad drugs in terms of the illegality, are we going to do that with cannabis as well?
But the room has determined in the last ballot that the room wants to get into this detail and a different approach, yeah. So, yeah.
Here. So are we going to get into that same level of detail when we talk about cannabis? Because we can't just pretend that cannabis is all one thing and get into the level of detail we're now getting with other drugs.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the answer there is we've effectively at the last meeting agreed that the strategy this Assembly would take in making its recommendations is to give high-level strategic sense of direction to the Oireachtas, but to let the Oireachtas and the legislator and the government figure out the specific mechanisms around regulating cannabis, if that is to be a recommendation. But it may not be the recommendation. We have to still get into voting stage 3 and allow the room to decide which approach. So while the room here, for example, may have agreed significantly that there's a different approach needed to cannabis, some people in the room may see that approach as being the status quo. Others may feel it needs a completely different recommendation. So there's no clarity yet until we get to vote on it, what the room views is the appropriate way to deal with cannabis. So we have to wait and see how that pans out.
Okay, so far we have 2 listed that we will put the ballot, and look, we can come back, but so far we have these 2 lists that you want to test in terms of an approach. What models, going back to the models, apply to these 2 drugs?
And just to say, the third option, which will be on the ballot paper, is all other drugs. So once you have gotten through the list of specific drugs, which is cannabis, and then this group of hallucinogenic drugs, then the other option, unless the room agrees, is a third or fourth set of drugs. Everything else folds in under all other drugs.
Okay, 2 more. I'm going to go to table number 1 first, table 13, and then I'll try to come back to Jack.
I'd just like to recommend, for the purposes of thoroughness and completeness, and given its prevalence in society, I think we should test the room on cocaine as well.
Okay. Can I have a level of understanding in the room that we will test cocaine? Again, you're not declaring a vote for it at this stage, but you're declaring it's worth putting on the ballot for testing. Can you have a show of hands if you feel let's test cocaine in terms of the next stage of the process? Show of hands if you feel we should. It's a reasonable number. It's not a majority, but I think so. If you feel, just so I'm clear, this is important, I think there's a reasonable number within the room feel we should at least test it. That's not your vote in favour or against. You're just putting it down for test. Okay, so we will. Table 13? No, okay. Jack, do you want to? One more, please. You just put your table numbers up, please, so I can see.
I just wanted to, well, I think I have two things I would wish to say. I guess the first is if like a drug receives its own separate ballot, which I believe is going to be happening to cannabis and the other hallucinogenic substances.
And cocaine at this stage, yeah.
And cocaine. What exactly would that entail? And I'm guessing there would be some differences considering that that's a wide variety of different substances. And I guess I also wanted to say there have been like some members who have expressed, in my opinion, a very reasonable concern that a possibly more convoluted and complex approach, which kind of gives either preferential or different treatment to other drugs, could come across as too convoluted and it just wouldn't be effective. But I believe that there are certain drugs that just legitimately deserve their own sort of circumstances and their own sort of, they need different, they deserve different criteria because this issue is just so complex. I kind of feel that sort of going into umbrellas, specifically with like synthetic drugs and just more conventional drugs, I just kind of feel that you know, it just doesn't work, and it's just, in my opinion, almost naive.
Okay, Jack, can I think, Aveline, table 1, did you want to make a comment? Table 1?
It might relate to more so to the last ballot, but in my opinion, we're either choosing to be tolerant or we're not. We're either choosing to destigmatise or we're not. And by choosing drug by drug by drug, surely that just means that that's our society associated glamour with certain drugs or acceptance of certain drugs, that we're allowing that to continue, and therefore we're not totally destigmatizing, or we're just being tolerant for certain drugs versus other drugs if we vote for this drug by drug model.
Yeah, and it would mean a result of a ballot would mean you have a certain tolerance for certain type drugs. That's what it would mean. But we have tested in the previous ballot, and people have moved. Yeah. Okay, so there are 3 I have listed, and look, we can test the process with these 3. We will draft a ballot paper based on these 3 for now. Just test this. We'll go back. We'll test the ballot on this process here. You will be asked in the ballot process to set out your preferred model for each of these 3 drugs.
Yeah. And if I could take a moment to show you the ballot paper. Pardon?
Can we re-vote on the last ballot, or is it done?
No,
yeah.
A lot of people are talking.
The ballot papers, by voting on individual drugs, you can still end up with the same recommendation, even though we've said on the last ballot we don't want the same rule for all drugs.
No, just the last ballot since then.
Which was that one?
Just the last one we just did there.
Oh.
There's been a lot of talk there. I think it would be a different outcome if we re-voted on it.
I'm not following you.
And we re-vote on the last vote that we just did. 2.2, is it?
Sorry, can I test around? Does everybody want to? No, I don't. Colin, we can't. The room is determined which way they want to move next. Del, 12.
Sorry, can I just...
Sorry, no, I'm going to have to respect the chair. I have to call different people at different times. Please, table 12.
Yeah, I just vaguely want to challenge what you were saying about destigmatisation. So one could technically have voted F for the last, which a lot of us did, the majority did, and anticipate that in this conversation, say, some drugs, cannabis, would go to D, so it would still be destigmatized. Or, sorry, cannabis would go to E, so it could potentially be legalized and totally destigmatized. And then the rest would go to D. So we're still saying decriminalization, destigmatization. It's just different approaches for specific ones, whether we want them regulated, taxed by whatever, have a revenue stream from the government, all of that stuff. So I think we're getting a bit muddled in that if we're choosing them here on a Word doc, that it means that some aren't good enough and some are okay. I think we can pull back a little bit and say that we can still decide that down the road.
And you can in this process, Adele, I think. So could you just pass the call just to what the ballot paper would look like.
So just to give you a sense of what the ballot paper would look like, for each of the classes of drugs agreed there would be a simple question, which is to ask you, in relation to cannabis, rank your preferred options in order of preference from 1 to 5. So each box gets, you can put in rank order of preference. Your first preference for cannabis would be either the status quo or a health diversion approach, comprehensive health-led approach, tolerance, or legalization regulation. You put in 1 to 5 of your first preference, second and third. You don't have to go all the way down to 5. If there's only 3 options yet you'd actually contemplate and support, put in just 3 options, 1, 2 and 3. Similarly then, you get to the next question, which is, which will be plant-based medicines or hallucinogenics. And again, you'll be asked to identify your preferred approach. And finally, you'll get to the question of all other drugs. And again, you can distinguish, if you've agreed with a universal approach to all drugs, you can put the same X in the same box for all these different options. If you want to distinguish between how to treat cannabis versus all other drugs, then you indicate that through your rank preference 1 to 5.
I might just ask Kieran, just to add to what Cathal said, just in time, why would we go on 1 to 5?
Yeah, this makes it a bit more nuanced in the voting. The previous ones, we were just trying to determine whether there was an overall majority in the room for a specific course of action. For example, an overall majority in favour of treating all drugs the same. On this particular one, we want to now come up with, we've said we're not going to treat all drugs the same. We're going to group them into whatever classes. So let's just, for simplicity, say we decided cannabis treat separately and everything else gets lumped together. I know we have a few other ones separate. The question then is, what do we want to recommend for cannabis? We've got to recommend one of tolerance or legalization or health-led or whatever the options are. And the way we do that is exactly the same way you would vote at a national election if you were electing the president. It's like a Dáil election with a single seat or a by-election. What you've got is, if any one of those options gets a majority, if it gets 51% of the vote, it automatically wins. That's the option. The chances are, because we've got 5 options, that they'll all get different levels, and it's quite possible no single option will get 51% of the vote. If that happens, what we do is we eliminate the one that scores least. So we sort them all by the first preferences. None gets a clear majority. We take all the votes, all the ballot papers that, let's say, voted for the status quo, divide them up based on their second preference, and add those to the first preferences for the other 4 options. And again, if somebody at that stage has a majority, has 51%, that's the recommended approach for that particular drug. If not, we continue, we eliminate the next lowest, and the next lowest if necessary. We can only go 2 or 3 steps before we run out and we end up with a single option anyway. But that is the way that all of the national elections are carried out here in the country. It's considered by the Irish state to be the gold standard for getting a consensus opinion from a population when there are multiple choices, like there are here. And that will give us, it won't give us everybody's favourite option, because you can't get everybody's favourite option, but it will give us the best consensus across the group for the approach for cannabis in this case. We'll then do exactly the same for whatever we had, MDMA or magic mushrooms, and we will do exactly the same at the end for everything else that we haven't specifically picked out. You may well end up at the end of the day with the status quo for everything, or option C for everything. Even though we said initially we didn't want the same thing for everything, we might, when it comes down to the vote, potentially end up with the same option. But at least we've then analysed them individually and said, yeah, for cannabis, this is the approach we want. For everything else, this is the approach. So it doesn't exclude anything that we've already voted for. You can still vote for the status quo. You can still vote the same for all drugs.
Okay.
And we'll end up with a consensus then.
And can I just clarify, when people are balloting, They have an option going 1 to 5. You don't have to go 1 to 5.
You don't have to go
express
to
your
5. You
preference.
can just put a number 1 if you want.
Yeah.
You can go all the way down the ballot paper 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Like any election.
If you only put a number 1 on the ballot paper and you're in one of the groups that's eliminated at some stage, then your vote is literally put aside and doesn't carry on. So if you have a second preference, put your second preference on, and if you have a third, put your third on, because it means that your vote carries forward to the next round and counts to some extent. So if you don't get your preferred option, you may get your second best, if that makes sense.
And we'll have different colour ballot papers for each.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to just clarify that? Just 1 second.
So what we're now proposing to do is print off ballot papers for each of the 4 options that are at the top of the list here. So a ballot paper on cannabis, another one on hallucinogenic drugs, a third on cocaine, and a fourth on all other illicit drugs. Each ballot paper will have a different colour, and you can vote on all 4 ballot papers at the same time, which will speed up the process. We'll then get you to cast your votes into the ballot box, and we'll go behind the scenes to count the results, which is going to take some time. We'll count those results over dinner time, or over lunchtime rather, because it's going to be a time-consuming process.
2 last things. Noel first, and then Mary, please.
Just a small but important point on the DMT, psilocybin, mushrooms, ayahuasca, ibogaine. All of these are very therapeutic substances and are often described as plant medicine. So I think it's a bit misleading to put in the word hallucinogenic, and I'd ask that to be taken away. There's a negative connotation to that, and we don't attach to cannabis or cocaine.
Okay, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Rebecca, I will come to you. Mary, did you want to come in?
Oh yeah, hi. I suppose it's just related to the last question there. I'm a little concerned with the term medicine being used here, because a medicine has a very specific definition. It has to go through regulatory approval. It has to go through randomized controlled trials. You can't just throw the term medicine around. And I know the terms of reference of this Citizens' Assembly excluded these medicinal uses of drugs, and I think just to put it in at this stage. We have very much taken a view of drugs as a whole category, and now suddenly they're being parsed out. There haven't been any presentations specifically about these substances, apart from there's been some on cannabis. But I just very concerned about the use of the term medicine here. Okay. And if you don't vote on medicines, you know,
okay, we're not.
That's up to
medicine isn't on the ballot paper. Yeah. Won't be on the ballot paper. Okay, sorry, Rebecca, can I please?
Just on the ballot, if you could go back to that slide, please, Cathal, I just wanted to seek a little bit of clarification around the words. So D, tolerance, I don't believe it's comprehensive enough. What I'd like to see, if we're going to be true to D, would be to the mentioning of the words combining decriminalisation and depenalisation for possession. Tolerance to me indicates that there's more of what was the word I used? Discretionary approach. So I think, if we could just maybe use that terminology.
Okay.
Okay, all I would say though then is not to confuse matters. There's also elements within Model C that would need to be spelled out, including diversion, decriminalisation, and dissuasion. So there is, when you get into the options C and D, there's quite a lot of complexity and nuance. This is just a summary way to try and capture it, assuming that everybody has read the details and understands what lies behind it.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted that to be made aware and publicly noted, okay?
Thanks, Rebecca.
Can I just also add to that, if you're going to say possession, it's either possession for personal use or possession for sale and supply, which are 2 very different things as well.
Yeah. And as I said, we hope that the explanatory narratives that you have, each of you in front of your table, explains exactly what we mean. So we're talking about possession for personal use. And as I said, there's elements of decriminalisation, both in option C and option D. Just one comes with health diversion, the other doesn't.
Okay. Just going to test the room. Can you just show me your hands up in the air? You're ready to proceed with those 4 ballot papers for now? Okay. I'm going to ask the team to circulate the ballot papers, and we'll proceed to the ballot on those 4. Yeah. Okay.
So it'll just take us a few minutes to get the ballot papers printed, and we'll get those onto your tables. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the ballot papers are in the process of being distributed to you now. Again, 4 ballot papers for each person. Party.
Okay, the room's getting very cold indeed, is it?
Yeah, I didn't realise it. It's probably warmer up here, you know. Okay, your facilitator will shortly be distributing ballot papers now for everybody.
Sorry, could I have Marcus and Jesse up to the top just for a moment again, please? I just want to verify that the boxes are empty.
Marcus, when you're ready, please, for a second. All right, we don't have to vote just yet. 1 second. Sorry, apologies. Do you want to clarify? Anybody? Do you want to clarify the 4 sheets they have? If we don't need to clarify, it's okay. Yeah. So again, just please make sure you vote on the coloured pages only, not a white paper. The vote is open. You should have 4. One question, sorry. Can you come back? Just at the back. Can we have a mic just at the back?
Jerome, have we a roving mic for the back of the room?
Yes, Elaine has it. Sorry, we just have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a consensus from our table that with regard to certain drugs, people are between option C and D in that they want an option for depenalisation and decriminalisation of drugs, but also the option to avail of a health-led approach. So essentially option D, but with a health-led approach, because I don't think option C is explicit enough in that, you know, drugs remain illegal and this would minimise or potentially completely remove the possibility of criminal conviction. So if there's consensus in the room that a health-led approach is the ideal route, then what is the validity of having option D as a non-health-led approach? Could it be amalgamating that D becomes depenalisation, decriminalisation plus a health-led approach?
So maybe I can clarify that, right? So there are distinct differences between option C and option D. Both of them include decriminalisation. So of drugs, possession of drugs for personal use. The difference is option C includes what I would call proactive health referral or health diversion. So for people found in possession of drugs for personal use, they will be referred to a health-led intervention, whereas that doesn't exist in option D. Option D doesn't include health diversion, and that's the distinction. So option C, if you like, is what the Portuguese model does. It refers people found in personal possession for a health-led intervention. Option D is, we describe it as a tolerance model that doesn't have any significant implications other than the drugs found are confiscated, and that's the end of the story. So they're very distinct. Both of them include decriminalisation, but there's an inclusion of health diversion or health referral in model C or option C. There's not in option D.
I think just reading it is not conclusive or explicit enough for me in that the drugs remain illegal, and this would minimise or potentially, it's the word potential, I guess, potentially completely remove the possibility of criminal conviction.
Yeah.
So one could still receive a criminal record. What's the determination?
So that is a matter that is fraught with all sorts of constitutional and legal complexities, and this is why in option C and in option D, the decisions on the detail are referred back to the Oireachtas and for them to work out the balance between, you know, whether or not it's complete depenalisation, complete decriminalisation, or something somewhat less than that. That's a set of detailed legal questions that we don't have the capacity to answer here. So we have to simply indicate the high-level strategic direction we want. And the distinction between C and D is one includes referral to the health-led interventions, the other doesn't. And those are two very distinct choices. As I said,
they're distinct on the health-led, but I don't think they're distinct on the potential for criminal conviction.
Where's the mic at the minute? I've just lost track. Still, yeah, okay, go ahead. I'll just finish table 14 first, then table 12.
No, just to say again, I think they're distinct in terms of health-led or not, but I don't think they're distinct in terms of, or clear in terms of potential for criminal conviction.
Yeah, because there is ongoing legal uncertainty about the extent to which you can totally remove the criminal conviction possibility, or whether it has to remain. So in other words, there's a distinction between de jure and de facto decriminalisation, and it isn't within our grasp as an assembly to figure out the legalities, what's possible or not. So the answer is that one way or another, whether it's de jure or whether it's de facto, option C and option D both will result in decriminalisation. The extent of that has to be determined by the Oireachtas.
And just as I take more questions, which I can, I know there's a lot of people ready to, but the ballot is open, but I know people still want clarity. Table 12.
It's really following on from the previous comment, because I agree 100% in terms of, again, my preferred outcome is a mix of those two, but should the outcome of this poll not just be presented as it is in terms of like a graph of the preferences of the Citizens' Assembly as opposed to PR down to the final remaining option, because it would give a better view of what the Citizens' Assembly are choosing.
Kieran, you might have heard all of that, but it was, thanks, sorry, I'll just check with Kieran here before we... I'm going to ask Kieran to answer that question there, please.
Sorry, I didn't catch all of that, but it's been explained to me here. Just to point out, the voting process we're doing is single transferable vote. It's not actually PR when you're only coming up with a single result at the end. But we will be presenting a chart after the vote for each of the ballot papers, showing you exactly the way the voting went, how many people voted for first preference for option 1, 2, or A, B, C, D, and E, and then at each stage, which options, if any, were eliminated and how those votes transferred to each of the remaining options. So there will be a clear picture of exactly how the count went at each stage following the counting. Sorry, one other question that just came up there. If you've made a mistake on your ballot paper, it is perfectly legitimate to cross out the mistake as long as it's clearly crossed out and just write your proper preference on the page. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the little square box. It can be just to the side of it, as long as it's clear which option your preference is for.
Okay, you can take your time, but the ballot is open. Okay. We just have somebody outside who's just due to cast a ballot, so we just let them a chance to come back in. Okay. Okay, can I just check if anybody still needs to post their ballot? I'm going to close the ballot in just a moment. Oh. If I can invite anybody who hasn't voted yet, please. Okay, I'm just checking now. One member, his ballot is still there, but here's Kieran. Kieran, we're just about to go ahead. Take your time, hurry up. No pressure, Kieran, just hurry up there. Giddy up. Okay, we're now officially closing that ballot result, and the independent, fantastic observers are taken away for counting and distribution. Okay, can I get all your attention, please? That was a complex set of voting, and we let the ballot the team work through that through lunchtime. I'm going to continue to proceed on. We have lunch. Sorry, folks, can I get everybody's attention? We just say where we're going next. John? So we're going to continue the next 15 minutes or so, use our time. We will be breaking at 1 for lunch. Going to move to ballot paper 1, and you'll see on ballot paper 1 there's potentially 4 recommendations for balloting on. Again, can I restate and encourage you at the tables with your facilitators, primarily focus on the big, bold statement that's made. Some of the other supporting text is context, can be changed different stages, but the big, bold statement is what we will be asking you to ballot on or otherwise. So can I give you they're shorter questions, not as complex. Can I just give you 10 minutes at the table, and then we'll just take stock before we go to lunch. So 10 minutes, and I'll call back in again. Thanks.